Welcome to Biology 201. These lectures will review the materials covered in the textbook. I expect you to watch the online lectures before coming to class each week. Each lecture will be a mixture of my lectures and other YouTube videos I have selected to complement the material I am providing to you, and to mix things up a bit. Our first lecture will be on Chapter 1, Introduction and Themes in the Study of Life. At the start of each lecture, I will review a lecture outline, the objectives for the chapter, and the semester course map. This semester we have 5 units. We'll begin Unit 1 with Chapter 1, which covers the basic principles of biology and the properties of life. The unit will continue with Chapter 5, Macromolecules, and we will finish the unit with Chapter 6, the cell. For Chapter 1 we'll be discussing what is biology, themes in biology, evolution, and the process of performing science. The objectives I outline for each chapter are skills that I expect you to have gained by the end of this material. This does not mean the end of the online lecture, but by the end of the time we have spent in class covering this material. If you feel that you are not meeting these objectives by the time we finish with the material, please see me. These are our objectives for Chapter 1. Take a moment to review these before continuing on with the lecture. I will also have these copied and in a Word document in Blackboard for your access. During the lectures, I will ask a series of questions. I encourage you to pause the recordings after each question and think about the answers before continuing. Our first question is, what is science? So go ahead and pause the recording and think about this question. Write down any answers in your notes, and when you're ready, hit play again. Science is defined as the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. So based on that definition of science, how is science different from other areas of interest, such as art or history? The big difference is that science is built upon observation and experimentation. Every principle that we will discuss this semester can be tested and proven again and again. Sometimes theories and principles can be determined to be false as new technology becomes available. This is why scientists rebuke teaching creationism and other ideas such as that in science, because they cannot be proven through experimentation. It is not because we don't believe these ideas, it's simply that these ideas and beliefs are not science. Now that we have discussed what is science, let's look at the subfield we'll be studying this term. What is biology? This is most likely a definition you are very familiar with. Biology is the study of life, but that doesn't fully explain what we'll be discussing this term. Before we can study life, we need to define life. Life is defined by 7 properties. These properties are order, evolutionary adaptation, response to environment, reproduction, growth and development, energy processing, and regulation. Pause the recording right now and come up with a new example of each of these properties of life. Bring these properties to class on a separate sheet of paper for points in discussion. I will ask you to do this several times throughout all of our lectures as check marks to make sure that we're following along in the lecture, as well as reward you for your attention. Throughout these lectures, I will do knowledge checks. These questions are meant to test your understanding of the material we have discussed. In class, we will dive deeper into the principles, but for now, we are only looking for understanding. Here is our first question. After I read it, pause the recording and think about the answer. When you think you have the answer, start the lecture again to see if you are correct. So our first question is, which of the following properties or processes do we associate with living things? Go ahead and pause the recording and think about your answer. Good job! All of these items are associated with properties or processes of living things. If you did not get this, you may want to back up the lecture and watch it again. Our book divides concepts in biology into themes. These themes will reappear throughout our material, but for Chapter 1, we will use them to discuss the basic concepts of biology. Our first theme is new properties emerge at each level in the biological hierarchy. This means that we can observe new properties at many different levels of a biological system. An example of this would be observing a plant cell and watching the functions of this cell, including the chloroplast. As we move outwards to the tree, we can see a functioning organism using the chloroplasts within the cells to produce sugar from sunlight. This is what your text means by emergent properties. As you zoom out, each level you will observe more functions within the system. We just discussed the idea of emergent properties, but didn't discuss how this is possible. Biology is a vast subject, covers areas from microbiology, which is the study of bacteria and viruses, to ecology and working with the entire ecosystem. Take a moment to pause the recording and explore this online tool called The Scale of the Universe. This will help you visualize just how vast the field of biology or any other scientific field can be. Now that you've had a chance to explore the scale of different items within our biological hierarchy, let's look at each level. We begin with the biosphere, which is the entire planet. Our next level is the ecosystem, which is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. For an example, an ecosystem is a tropical rainforest or a desert. The next level is community. Just like we are a community college, communities encompass many living organisms within an environment. CWI has biology majors, art majors, math majors, etc. Continuing this example, if we only wanted to evaluate biology majors, that would be our population. An individual student constitutes an organism. The organ systems examples are our hearts or cardiovascular system. Tissues are those cells that form the muscles, and a cell is the lowest level of hierarchy that still maintains all the properties of life. Within a cell are organelles which function much like our organs. Lastly, the lowest level of biological hierarchy are molecules that together form an entire biosphere. Time for another knowledge check. Pause the recording and think about this question. When you think you have the answer, start the recording again to see if you are correct. Good job! A localized group of organisms that belong to the same species are called a population. Once again, if you did not get this correct, rewind the recording and listen to the discussion again, or look at some of our supplemental material. Our second and third theme for this semester go hand in hand and are, the theme number 2 is organisms interact with other organisms in their physical environment, and theme number 3 is life requires energy transfer and transformation. To put this theme simply, this theme is the circle of life. Just like Mufasa told Simba in The Lion King, we are all connected in the circle of life. This circle is the cycling of nutrients, and the only thing that can enter the system is energy in the form of sunlight. Conversely, the only thing that can leave the system is the energy in the form of heat. This heat is generated by organisms doing work, just like when you are exercising and your body puts off heat from the process of using the chemical energy from your food. The main example for this term of the circle of life will come from chapters 9 and 10. This picture is both of these chapters summed up succinctly. It is important that you realize that chloroplasts do not produce energy. Somewhere along your education, you probably learned that mitochondria and chloroplasts perform the same function. Don't worry about this. I had it wrong too. This is incorrect. These two organisms actually work in a cycle of nutrients. We'll learn more about this later, but for right now, I want you to take a moment and draw this picture yourself in your notes. Bring this to class for points and discussion. Theme number 4, that structure and function are correlated at all levels of biological organisms. While your book uses anatomy as a primary example of this theme, this term we will be observing it as it relates to molecular shape of macromolecules. We will learn that the function of proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids are all dependent on the proper form of these molecules. We have already alluded to theme number 5 when we discussed biological hierarchy. The cell is the lowest level that still exhibits all properties of life. This is restated in our theme. The cell is an organism's basic unit of structure and function. We'll discuss cells and their structures in Chapter 6, but for now, be aware of the two different types of cells that exist, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes are basic cells that do not contain a nucleus or other membrane-bound organelles. The eukaryotic cell is larger and makes up our bodies of eukaryotic organisms. The next statement is something you may already be familiar with, which is the continuity of life is based on inheritable information in the form of DNA. This simply states that we are who we are because of DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. This molecule has two main components, a phosphate sugar backbone and nitrogenous bases. We will study this molecule throughout the semester, so take a moment now and get familiar with it. Draw figure 1.11b in your text and bring it to class for points and discussion. We have reached our final theme. This theme discusses how biological processes actually work. Have you ever wondered why your stomach stops growling after you've eaten, or why your blood clots when you cut yourself? These feedback mechanisms are what drive all biological processes. We will discuss this term. These can be a little confusing at first, but we will work on these in class. Right now, try to grasp the basic understanding.
This simple animation illustrates the principle of negative feedback, or feedback inhibition, in the regulation of a chemical reaction sequence in a cell. The sequence involves 4 molecules, A, B, C, and D. 3 different enzymes catalyze the conversion of one molecule to the next. The final product, D, inhibits the first enzyme in the sequence. When the concentration of D rises to a certain point, the reaction shuts itself down. In positive feedback, a product of the reaction sequence enhances the action of one of the enzymes, increasing the rate of production of the product. Positive feedback is less common than negative feedback in living systems.
It was Stansky who stated that nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution, and this is true. Evolution accounts for the unity and diversity of life, but what does that mean? Let's start by looking at the diversity of life. Before we dive in too deep into evolution, let's look at the basic concept of evolution.